Welcome to this explainer. Look, I want you to just sit back for a second and really think about your past. We all have those foundational moments, right? Those incredibly vivid flashes of childhood, or maybe an intense argument that we just carry with us everywhere. But what if the very foundation of your reality is built on shifting sands? In this explainer, we're going to take a slightly unsettling dive into the hidden mechanics of the human mind. We're looking at the architecture of the past and how your memory actually rebuilds your reality. So, I want to start by directly challenging you with this. What if one of your strongest, absolute core memories never actually happened? And I don't mean because you're lying, or because you're confused, and certainly not because your brain is broken in some way, but simply because of the way the human brain is fundamentally wired to process the past. See, most of us kind of treat memory like a perfect vault or a video camera. We think an event happens, our brain hits record, saves the file securely, and then when we need it, we just hit play. But the scientific reality? It's completely different. Memory is an active reconstruction. It works way more like an editor. Every time you recall something, your brain doesn't just play back a recording. It actively rebuilds that past experience piece by piece, right there on the fly. And just like any editor, it sometimes changes the script.
Okay, Section 1, Rebuilding the Past. Let's look at the actual clinical mechanics of how memories are formed and retrieved.
The absolutely crucial point here is what happens in the exact moment an event occurs. Your brain does not store a complete high-definition panoramic video. Nope. Instead, it stores fragments, a splash of color over here, an intense emotion there, maybe a snippet of sound, or just a general impression of what things meant. Later, when you try to remember that moment, your brain has to scramble. It gathers up all those scattered little pieces of data and stitches them together to reconstruct the moment for you in real time.
Now, what happens when there are missing pieces? Because obviously, reconstruction leaves a lot of room for error. Well, if your brain can't find a fragment to complete the picture, it simply fills in the gap. And the honestly terrifying fact is, it doesn't tell you it's guessing. It pulls from other similar events, stories your family told, old photos, scenes from movies, or just logical assumptions. You might clearly remember balloons and a clown at your childhood birthday party, but did they really exist? Or did your brain just assume that's what a birthday party is supposed to look like? And this brings us to a phenomenon that happens to absolutely all of us, the false memory. This is when you remember something so vividly and with total confidence, but the memory is partly or sometimes completely inaccurate. This is a huge takeaway for us. Having false memories is not a sign of a broken brain. It's a surprisingly common, everyday occurrence that just results from how efficiently our brains try to stitch those tiny fragments together.
Moving to Section 2, the power of suggestion. Let's see just how incredibly fragile these stitched-together memories really are to outside influence.
To really understand this, we have to look at the work of pioneering cognitive psychologist Elizabeth Loftus in one of her most famous experiments. Participants watched a video of a car crash. Later, they were asked questions about it, but the researchers changed just one subtle word. Half the group were asked, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other? The other half were asked, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? That single word, smashed, drastically altered what people believed they had seen. The people who heard smashed actually remembered the cars going much faster.
But the mind-bending result goes even further than that. Weeks later, those participants who heard the word smashed confidently remembered seeing broken glass at the scene of the accident. Guys, there was zero broken glass in the original video. None. A simple suggestion, quietly introduced after the event, literally reached back in time and altered the memory itself. Their brains edited the past to match the question they were asked.
Which brings us to Section 3 and frankly the most vulnerable aspect of human memory, the reconsolidation trap. This is where the simple act of remembering actually becomes the danger.
Okay, let's walk through this 4-step loop because it is absolutely fascinating. Step 1, the event happens. Step 2, you recall the memory. Now you'd think recalling it is harmless, right? Like pulling a book off a shelf and reading it. But actually, when a memory is recalled, it becomes active and fluid all over again. Step 3, while it's active like that, it can be altered by your current emotion, a passing suggestion, or even a new perspective. And Step 4, it gets resaved, reconsolidated. Every single time you revisit a memory, you might be slightly rewriting it, saving over the old file with a shiny new updated version. So how does this actually play out in your daily life? Well, we retell our favorite stories at parties, we replay arguments in our heads, usually making ourselves sound a bit smarter. We listen to our family's version of what really happened back then. We absorb comments on social media. Every single time we do this, the memory shifts just a tiny bit. One awkward detail gets softened, one heroic detail gets exaggerated,
until eventually you stop remembering the actual event entirely and you just start remembering the polished story you built around it. Section 4. Emotion, Arguments, and Identity. Now we are going to ground all this psychological science in our daily lives to see how these edited memories actually shape who we are.
Now you might be sitting there thinking, okay, sure, maybe my memory of some random childhood birthday party is flawed, but I know what happened during that deeply traumatic event or that incredibly joyful moment because I feel it so strongly. So here's the crucial point to remember. Vivid emotion increases your confidence, but it absolutely does not guarantee accuracy. A memory that carries fear, shame, or intense excitement is always going to feel more real. But emotion is kind of like an Instagram filter. It makes the picture pop, but it doesn't mean the details behind the filter are objectively true.
Come on, we've all been in this exact situation. Two people passionately disagreeing about an argument from last month. Person A says, "You said this." Person B says, "I absolutely never said that. No way." And the crazy thing, often neither person is lying. Both truly deeply believe they are telling the truth. Why? Because their brains have completely rebuilt the memory of that argument through the lens of self-protection. They remembered their interpretation of the tone, the insult, the emotion, and their brain reconstructed the actual quotes to match exactly how they felt.
And this is where it gets incredibly deep. Who are you? Really think about it. Often, you are simply the story you remember about yourself, the kid who was always ignored, the student who was a failure, the one who was betrayed. But I want to ask you to question something right now. What if those absolute core personal identities are just heavily edited stories? What if the emotional meaning you attach to a memory grew larger than the facts over time, and you've built your entire self-image on a memory that has been reshaped by reconsolidation?
Section 5. The mind as a storyteller. You really have to wonder, from an evolutionary standpoint, why on earth would our brains operate with such a flawed, easily corrupted system?
Well, the answer comes down to survival, flexibility, and speed. If you had a perfect, objective memory vault, it would be heavy, slow, and just incredibly inefficient to search through when you're in a panic. Your brain doesn't need to be a perfect courtroom record. It just needs to learn the pattern of danger, the lesson of a social cue, the general gist of a situation so you can survive tomorrow. It happily sacrifices exact, perfect details to help you predict the future quickly.
Because the brain operates this way, we encounter some very strange side effects. Like this one, the brain frequently mistakes familiarity for actual proof of a memory. If you stare at a childhood photo enough times, or if you vividly imagine a scenario your family told you about over Thanksgiving, those neural pathways get fired up. Eventually, that image feels so deeply familiar that your brain misreads that familiarity as a first-person memory. You're not actually remembering the event anymore, you're just remembering the photograph.
So what do we actually do with this unsettling information? Do we just throw our hands up and stop trusting our own minds? No. But we do need to make a practical, humbling shift in our perspective. Instead of aggressively claiming, "I remember it, so it must be true," we learn to say, "I remember it this way." But memory can be edited. That small shift, it can literally change your life. It makes you less aggressive in arguments. It makes you way more empathetic. And it makes you much less trapped by your old emotional conclusions.
And that leads us to this incredibly empowering realization. If your mind has the power to quietly reshape the past in your memory, then you have the power to consciously reshape the meaning of that past right now in the present. You are not permanently bound to the painful stories your brain has learned to repeat on loop. If the story was edited once to protect you, it can absolutely be reevaluated now to free you.
Which leaves us with this final, profound thought to close out our explainer. Memory is not a perfect mirror. It is a storyteller. Your brain is constantly trying to turn the absolute chaos of life into a cohesive narrative you can carry with you. But as you navigate your relationships, your identity, and your past, I want to leave you with this one lingering thought. Storytellers, well, they sometimes get things wrong. So whose version of the story are you living today?